Welcome everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope you guys are doing well today. I've got a very cool countdown for you guys. It is a top 10 of disco flavored rock albums. I know, a kind of strange combination when you think about it on the surface, but surprisingly, it actually works very well. Now, this took me quite some time to put together because this subgenre of disco flavored rock isn't that big out there. A lot of one-off songs, but not many full albums that actually fall into this category. But I've compiled 10 with one honorable mention, so you're actually going to get 11 of these things here. We're going to jump through this and do the breakdown on it all in just a bit. But before we get started, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you're going to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of rock, just like this with top 10 disco flavored rock albums. So I'm going to start with that honorable mention that I talked about, and it goes to Edgar Winter in the Edgar Winter album, 1979. In fact, when I was putting this list together, I found that most of these fall in that time frame, so I'm not really sure why. I don't know if disco just got big enough that by 1979 everybody had to be doing it, kind of a thing. But 1979 for this album, third solo album, but ninth overall amongst all the different projects he was doing at the time. Edgar Winter was always trying new things, mainly amongst those different projects and stuff like that. So it wasn't really out of the ordinary for him to be doing it on this and incorporating disco into it. He had always done things that infused funk, soul, R&B, and blues. And again, we're going to see that a lot throughout the whole list here. But he really kind of brought the elements of disco to a more prominent element on this particular album here. Did it to a really high degree. And he ended up having a pretty decent sized hit with the song Above and Beyond. So again, if this is up your alley, check out Edgar Winter and the track Above and Beyond, and then give the whole album a listen, because as I was talking about, this countdown here, this top 10 is focusing on albums that actually have that whole disco flavored rock feel to it. All right, so kicking off at number 10, we've got Tom Johnston and Everything You've Heard Is True, 1979, debut solo album from him. This first one being since he left the Doobie Brothers, because he was the former vocalist of the Doobies. He did record 6 albums with him, and known for his rock and roll sound with the Doobies, whereas his counterpart Michael McDonald, who took over vocals in full once he left, was more into the blue-eyed soul sound. So if Michael McDonald had done this, I kind of would have gotten it, but this was Tom, and Tom had always rocked up a bit more. So the sounds on this were a little jarring the first time I got the album, but I really grew to love this, especially songs like Down by the River and Savannah Nights, which is probably the most disco sounding song on here. But there's just a cool vibe throughout the whole album on here, making it totally worth checking out. Next one is one I just bought based on the album cover here, and I'm so glad that I did. Coming in at number 9, Jim Capaldi, Electric Nights, also 1979. This one here being his 6th solo album from the drummer who was formerly with Traffic, and another artist that would shift his style and genre through the times, making a lot of different albums, very interesting sounds throughout his catalog because of it. This one's no different. As I said, with this album cover, I mean, just look at this here in the title, Electric Nights. I looked at that and I said, this has got to have some of that flavor to it. And I took a chance on it, and sure enough it did, and I'm really glad because it totally paid off. The album itself is a great snapshot of the overall subgenre, and unfortunately the subgenre never really took off. I wish there was a whole thing of just bands that did disco-infused rock albums, but I find it to be very few and far between. You'll get the one-off song, but you don't always get the whole album the way some of these bands did. This one didn't even chart, unfortunately, but if you can track one down, and I highly recommend it, it's totally worth exploring. Coming in at number 8, Lou Reed, The Bells, also 1979, 9th solo album from Lou Reed, the former Velvet Underground member. You know, Lou Reed was always into the art rock sound. This one here had much more of a jazzy sort of vibe to it, but he did venture into the popular sound of the day, disco, with this one, sort of really bringing some of that character to this album. He even had a song on here titled Disco Mystic, which really, you know, of course, helps in that idea and thought anyways. But other great tracks on here like Stupid Man, which was written by or with Nils Lofgren, who's with the E Street Band, Crazy Horse, of course his solo stuff. In fact, he wrote 3 songs on here with Nils and Lou wrote 3 songs together. And then Nils would record his own version of the song Stupid Man, changing it to Driftin' Man on the album Breakaway Angel in 2001. So if you want to get a cool comparison between this version of it here and what later on, which would be 22 years later on, Nils does his own version of it. But there's other great stuff on here, like the song I Want to Boogie With You. And it's just a great little sidestep and sound for Lou Reed on here, where he takes that disco-infused rock. And again, if you're a fan of this subgenre like me, this is a really good one. When I got this one, it's got to be, first of all, it's my favorite Lou Reed album, but it was just one of those ones that I put it on and it was so good at the time, and then not having anything else to go along with it has really made me want to search out more of these. Now I've got a handful of them, and when I put one on and it kicks off that feeling for me, I've got other ones to reach for. And that's really what I want this top 10 list to be for you guys. For those of you that do like the subgenre like me, you're going to have other ones to go explore and grab. Coming in at number 7, Santana, Inner Secrets from 1978, 10th studio album from the band, of course featuring Carlos Santana. It's full of their trademark fusion of Latin, jazz, rock, and blues, which they always emphasized, you know, on their albums. But now they've taken that and they've really emphasized the parts of it, the bass and the keyboard and the rhythm and stuff like that, to get a disco flavor involved. And while some of their other albums have some elements of that as well, I felt that this one here has the most of it, because Marathon has it, Shingo has it, but this one here, in my opinion, is the best of those 3. So it's really noticeable on track number 3, One Chain, Don't Make No Prison. But I think that's because on the CD edition of it, what I found out is they replaced the original from the LP with an extended disco mix. So if you got the CD like me, you're probably going to dig it even more than if you've only got an LP edition of this album. But I do hear those disco elements throughout the whole, especially on songs like Dealer, Spanish Rose, Move On, and there's just a nice consistent presence throughout on the album, making it a fun listen all the way through. Coming in at number 6 was another surprise one to me. The Jeremy Spencer Band, Flea from 1979, 3rd solo album. This one is a reissue on the Wounded Bird label, so you can track it down on CD. Very different from what the guitar player was doing when he was with Fleetwood Mac. In fact, I don't think that this, you know, if his name was not written on this, I wouldn't even know that there was any connection to the Fleetwood Mac legacy here, because of it having such a distinct sound and that disco flavored rock. But to me, that's okay, because this one here is one of the best examples of all that we're talking about today for that sound. It's great from start to finish on it. For me, it just sucks that this is the only album that he did in this style. I've checked out the other things Jeremy Spencer did. I guess this one didn't do well enough for him to do more of it. And so this is the only one we get from him, but it is totally worth checking out. Coming in at number 5 is a recent find for me. Ken Hensley, Free Spirit, in 1981, his 3rd solo album, but of course it came after a long stint in Uriah Heep, first released since leaving Uriah Heep in 1980. And again, Ken is one of those ones who always brought the soul, funk, R&B, and rock sounds that he was doing in his music. So for him to bring in the disco sound as well, not that big of a stretch. But he's such a skilled musician to where he did all of that so well that when doing the disco-infused sound too, again, you wouldn't immediately think that it was Ken Hensley doing this. It's just very good. It's effortless and doesn't feel forced in any way. Ken definitely feels at home on this album. That's one of the other things with all of these. There's some where bands felt, or it sort of sounded forced that they were doing it, and I don't feel that to be the case with any of these albums we're talking about today. I feel that this one here is sort of like the Jeremy Spencer Band, is a milestone, at least in the disco flavored rock albums. Unfortunately, the album didn't do a whole lot otherwise, but definitely should be considered as a major thing amongst the disco flavored rock albums. And on a side note, I do want to point out that former Uriah Heep vocalist David Byron also made a disco flavored rock album called Babyface Killer in 1978. I have yet to track that one down. Perhaps in another go round of this, that one would be making its charting position in here as well. But for now, we've got the Ken Hensley. Okay, coming in at number 4, Patrick Simmons. The album is called Arcade, 1983. This is the latest one in the era of this style of music. Debut solo album from the former Doobie Brothers guitar player, because the band had broken up by this point. And again, even though this is 1983 on here and it's kind of after the demise of disco, the album has a lot of those elements on it. They're done really well. Tom Johnston and other Doobie Brothers members and things of that nature, always having the funk, soul, R&B, and blues in their sound. I think a lot of the bands that did that didn't have far to go to incorporate in the different things of the rhythm and the bass lines and stuff like that that would give it the elements of disco. And again, he does it so well here. So while the opening track on this one kicks off with a more rock sound to it, by track number 2, So Wrong, and track number 3, Don't Make Me Do It, just grooving like late 70s era all over again. This album was one of my favorites. It was a shocker when I got it, but has grown to become one of my all-time favorite albums. I just love this thing. I can play it anytime. And I think, give it a chance, see if it grows on you the same way it did for me, and it may become one of your favorites within the disco flavor rock subgenre, I should keep saying, because it's such a small little genre or field of music. Coming in at number 3, another amazing one, Fandango, Cadillac, 1980. This is a Wounded Birds reissue, but I think it's now out on Rock Candy Records, so you can check this one out. 4th studio album and final album from the band, but the band is known for having featured Rainbow vocalist Jolyn Turner. Now, if you're looking for an album that sounds like Rainbow, you're not going to find it here. But if you want a killer disco flavored rock album, this is one of the best in the subgenre itself that has ever been made, in my opinion. I bought it simply because it featured Jolyn Turner, and it ended up kicking off an entire love of this genre. This was the first album that I got that was like it, and it was so good that I was asking around trying to find out what you would call this style of music so I could search it down, and I just couldn't find any way to label it. I'm calling it disco flavored rock. It's calling it its own subgenre. I have since found references to disco rock and other things like that. If you search those on the internet, these kind of things will come up. A lot of what I'm showing you guys here is actually ones that have run even under the radar of those lists. A lot of these lists will go with much more bigger popular bands and albums and things of that nature that for me don't really quite fall into that vibe of the disco flavored rock, meaning it is rock, but it's got a little bit of the element of disco. So if you're a rock fan, you still get to enjoy these. Do check out the songs Blame It on the Night, Stranger, and Hypnotized. All of them just amazing slabs of this kind of music. Okay, and what countdown would be complete if you didn't have the Rolling Stones on it? So coming in at number 2, Emotional Rescue, 1980. 15th studio album in the UK, but 17th in the US. They would later catch up in terms of their releases, but for a time being, they were off. So a lot of you might choose Rolling Stone albums like Some Girls from '78, or even the follow-up to Emotional Rescue, Tattoo You, in 1981. Those each had disco-flavored songs on it, but I didn't feel that the album as a whole had that characteristic running all the way through it. This one here I feel has a very consistent disco flavor running through the whole thing. And again, the Rolling Stones being a band that always had funk, soul, R&B, and blues in their sound, adding some disco elements was not far-fetched at all. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the Rolling Stones are the most comfortable at doing this than any of the bands that I'm talking about here today, maybe doing it better than anyone. Do check out this whole album, case in point with the first track off here, Dance Part 1, and the title track, Emotional Rescue, and see what I mean about this thing and how good it is that the Rolling Stones do it. All right, and the number one album that rock album that has the disco flavor to it goes to Kiss, Dynasty, 1979. Probably no surprise. One, I'm wearing a Kiss shirt, but two, just in terms of, if you guys know my background, you knew this album had to be in here. So while, you know, Kiss not normally associated with disco, the band had a huge hit with the first track off the album, I Was Made for Lovin' You. It would go all the way to number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart. So just a huge hit for the band. It's continued to be something that fans have always loved. And while that one song alone would warrant this album being in the list, it's the rest of the album that is exceptionally good on here, with disco elements permeating throughout the whole album. Check out the song Sure Know Something. That was another single released off of it. And even look at their outfits. If you watch the music videos and stuff from that era, the band totally took on the whole disco look, sound, everything. Production value on this thing. But I think that it creates a really interesting Kiss album, the way that they do it. And for a lot of fans like myself, this is our favorite Kiss album even. So going just beyond being a great disco-infused flavored rock album, which is my number one there, it's also my number one Kiss album. So I think that says a lot about the overall feel of this album and why it's so good in and of itself. If you've ever shied away from this album because you thought about not liking the disco flavored sound or whatnot, that sort of stuff, do yourself a favor, check this thing out and see if you like the disco flavored rock album as much as I do. I just think this is the pinnacle of glory in terms of that subgenre. So check that out. And there you go. Top 10 disco flavored rock albums. If you're a fan of this subgenre like me, you've now got 11 slabs of this stuff to go put on and enjoy. And anytime you get in the mood, you got a whole bunch of stuff to go to on it. And I just want to throw this out there. Some of you guys might reference this one. If you're a big fan of this one, but you never checked out Unmasked, there's a lot of characteristic in this one. These two have always gone hand in hand together for me. This one here really has the disco element, but if you're looking for more of that and you're looking for more of it in the Kiss vein, Kiss Unmasked continues a little bit of that there. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.